So we've given it a couple minutes and it was successfully updated our account to Azure Active Directory Premium P2 level. The P2 level allows us to use all of the advanced features that we're about to investigate. Now, this is just a test account. Unfortunately, does not have very many users or any applications or anything associated with it, but it's good for this purpose, I guess. First thing we're going to do, we're going to investigate something called Azure AD Identity Protection. If I go into the New tab, go down to Identity category, we saw that Azure AD Identity Protection is in yellow here. Now it's chosen our account, Scott's Test Directory, for this. If this is not the correct account, you can't change it here. You have to go over to the top right and say Switch Directory. Now I already have Identity Protection enabled, but if you don't, you just come down here and click the Create button, and that will enable the Azure Identity Protection onto your account. Now, Identity Protection is a series of machine learning algorithms that will analyze the users, logins, and any sort of vulnerabilities in your Active Directory account. So this is using some of those advanced AI machine learning features in order to warn you about things that could be happening within your Active Directory, suspicious logins, users that are not using their Active Directory as you would expect. And again, it allows you to improve your security by bringing this to your attention. You're also able to set policies that will restrict access. You won't block logins or require a multi-factor authentication or require a password change under certain risky conditions. So you click Create, and this will be enabled for your account. I've already got this enabled. So I'm going to close this up. And if I go into the services, I can type AD, and that will bring up the Identity Protection Service. Go into it, and we can see here now there's a whole new set of services that's going to tell us about the security of our Active Directory account. Now, right now, like I said, there's nothing really going on. I don't have any risk events. There's no high, medium, or low events that I need to investigate. There's no users that are flagged for suspicious activity, and there's been no vulnerabilities detected on my account. That's not strange for my account. If you ran this on a very large Active Directory, you might find different results. On the left, we see there's an Investigate section, and that's where you're going to investigate each of these three things: users, risk events, and vulnerabilities. And so if there were things to investigate, you would start here. The real fun happens in the Configuration tab. So this is where you're going to set the policy that determines what is considered a risky user, what is considered a risky sign-in. So I'm going to click on Sign-in Risk. Now, this is a policy that I can create that says, for this type of user, I want this, in this situation, I want this to happen. And it's going to estimate the impact. If I had 1,000 sign-ins a day, but I set up a new policy, it's going to impact 500 of them, it's going to let me know. Okay, and then at the bottom, I can turn this policy off and on. Now, all users is pretty self-explanatory. If you go into it, you can actually select individual users or exclude individual users. Now, why would you want to exclude individual users from a security policy? Well, there might be certain categories of users within your organization that are naturally going to be doing riskier things, and you do not want them to be always having to call support, always having to change their password. So, for instance, you might have a development team that is going to use their accounts to use programs, or they're going to do a certain testing on this, and you may want to exclude your development team from the strongest policies, etc. I mean, it's a total corporate decision, basically, in terms of what policies, how strong to enforce the policies, and whether you do it evenly across the organization, or you exclude certain individuals, or you make it stronger based on your job role, etc. So we're going to leave that as all users, but we can certainly filter this policy down only to a subset. The conditions is where the machine learning kicks in, so we basically set a high, medium, or low risk level. So if somebody's detected, remember we talked about sign-in risk. One example of sign-in risk would be somebody is logging in from a geographic location in which they've never logged in before. So suddenly I'm not trying to pick on a region of the world, but in a remote area of northern Russia, someone logs into your application, that could be considered a high risk sign-in, and you may want to set a policy that says, wait a second, if somebody's logging in from a area of the world that we're not expecting people to log in from, then we want to take additional precautions on that account. Okay, so we can say we want this to apply to almost everyone, low risk, medium risk, or only high risk sign-ins. I'm going to choose medium in this case. Now, what do we want to happen? So let's say for all users, if the machine learning algorithm detects it's a medium or high risk, what do we want to happen? So we go into controls, and we can either just blanketly allow access. We can allow access as long as they pass a multi-factor authentication, which would be a cell phone, an SMS message, an email, etc. Another way of verifying their identity before we allow them access to their account. Or we can just deny access, and then they'd have to call the help desk or something like that to get past it. Okay, so allowing access with multi-factor authentication seems like a reasonable precaution for a high risk or a medium risk sign-in. Again, from a device that you don't recognize, from a location you don't recognize, in a date and time that is not usually expected, etc. Now, that's my policy. Now we can review what this policy would impact against my account. Now again, this is a test account. Microsoft seems to be crying here. There's no data for them to analyze, but this happens, I guess. But presumably, if you had thousands of users and thousands of sign-ins, they would be able to say, oh, this would have impacted 0.1% of your sign-ins, and then you can turn the policy on and say save, and now you have a new policy that's voting against your Active Directory account that will restrict medium risk sign-ins to require authentication, multi-factor authentication, for instance. Now, they have the same, other than the sign-in policy, of course, there is the user themselves, right? So if they sign in or not, we can choose certain conditions. So again, we can choose which users it applies to. We can choose a risk level, low, medium, or high and above. And so what we want to happen, whether we want to block access or require a password change. So for instance, let's say a user has not logged in like 12 months. That could be the next time that they log in, that's an unusual event, and you may want to require a password change. So instead of requiring multi-factor authentication, this is just saying, you know what, it's been a long time since you've been here. Let's get you to reset your password. And again, you can review the users impacted, turn this on, and it becomes a user risk. And then this will get calculated on a daily basis into your report, and then you can start to investigate these things. You can set alerts, weekly digest email to you, and specifically, you probably want to pin this to your dashboard in order for this to be, basically something useful for you to review. Okay, so that's Azure AD Identity Protection. It's pretty easy to turn on and pretty easy to set up these types of policies. Microsoft has an article on their website talking about best practices. Certainly something we're looking into if you need to really set this up in a production setting.